All right, welcome everyone. Julie Lindsay here. This is INF537 Digital Futures Colloquium. And I do think this is our third week of colloquium sessions. I'm delighted to see you in the room, and a shout out to people who are listening to this recording. Now, going back to last week, we had Lynn Hay join us, and Lynn is actually in with us again tonight. Welcome, Lynn. Good to see you. And Lynn, I'm going to throw to you in a minute. I'm going to put you on the spot here because you are very au fait, in fact, more than that, with what our guest speakers are going to talk about. So I'd really like you to say a couple of words to introduce them. But RocketShoes is what we're launching into tonight, and it relates very much to what Lynn was saying in terms of innovation and edtech startups. So Lynn, could you say a couple of words and off we go? Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy to do that, although I didn't actually prepare myself for this evening. Okay, look, I'd love to introduce you to both Kieran and Matt, who I call the RocketShoes rock stars. What I love about Kieran and Matt is Kieran comes from like the K-12 sector and is currently working in a primary school. Matt's coming from the tertiary sector. And they're partnering as a startup to explore the use of blockchain technology to support digital asset management as well as other things. As most tech startups, you know, you start with an idea and then you just sort of you find that is going to grow. But the work that RocketShoes are doing and the technology that they're exploring, I find is really exciting, because it's all about putting the control of what you create as a digital creator, whether you're a student, whether you're an academic or a teacher, whether you're working out in the workplace. It's actually it gives you the control over the digital assets that you create. And so to me, I think that the RocketShoes rock stars, Kieran and Matt, are really, to me, on the cusp of something that's really powerful in terms of how new technology, such as blockchain technology, can support a new way of us managing our own personal information and data, and much, much more. So I'm going to hand over to Kieran, the smiley avatar, and Matt, the smiley real person, to present on this.
Awesome. Thanks, Lynn. So I might just sort of start. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yes.
So I might start just by talking a bit about my school. And essentially, we've built out RocketShoes initially for Warana Park Primary School, which we call the school on the blockchain. And I might go into some of the things that we've been doing at the school that will give you a bit of a sense of where we're at in terms of why we're building this and future thinking. So there's a bunch of articles about the school. We're pretty famous, as you can see, but this is a really important diagram to understand, or series of diagrams. So we're all kind of used to this topology on the left-hand side here, the Zuckerberg model, as I like to call it, where basically you put all your stuff into a big box that's belonged to somebody else. And now whether that's Zuckerberg or Google or Microsoft or iCloud or anything with cloud really in the title, it's all going to someone else that sort of owns that content, and they can do whatever they want with it. So we kind of moved from there. That's the world of Web 2.0. We've moved from there to this decentralized method of sharing files. You're probably familiar with torrent files if you've ever downloaded a movie illegally. You've probably used a torrent before. But that software is actually legit as well. It's actually used across the Department of Education to share distributions of Linux or Windows or all sorts of big files. It's really efficient at doing that. We've moved from there to a decentralized and distributed network, and that's the blockchain. And we're going to go into that a little bit. today. So yeah, more about my school. So we don't have classrooms as such at my school. We've got learning communities. So if you could think of each space as team teaching, and students come together into those communities to learn. So literally open spaces where you would have the year 2 unit. We've got a dragon boat, like literally a big dragon boat that you walk up into, and you can fly through Google Earth with gesture-based controls. We got a massive spaceship in the year 3 unit, like an old school spaceship. It takes up the whole space, but each of the spaces around it are different learning areas. We've got literally a massive castle and a big bus in the prep unit. So really cool spaces. And my classroom is the Enigma portal, which I think is the coolest space in the school. But we've got a philosophy in the school where we're platform agnostic. So that means from the desktop level, we've got Linux devices, Android devices, iOS devices, Chromebooks, Raspberry Pis, everything you can think of. And we've done that purposely for the kids so they get exposed to all types of technologies, not just one throughout the school. So when they move up into a BYOD program, they can choose what they prefer to learn with, not what the institution sort of decides for them. And it's more true to life. So when you go into the workforce, you sort of get to choose what you want to use. We're also cloud agnostic, so we use basically every cloud platform there is. We've done that purposely as well. So same philosophy, but just in the cloud. And we're blockchain agnostic as well. So moving into Web 3.0, we use different blockchain and Web 3.0 tools for whatever situation we need to use them for in terms of infrastructure and for teaching and learning as well. So this is how we kind of got to this space. So back in 2012, I started a bit gigs model with a group of year 10s when I was in a school in New South Wales. And when I came down to Victoria, I found the school I'm at now, Warana Park Primary School, and I asked the principal if he'd like to be Australia's first Bitcoin school. And he said, yeah, sure. What's that? And basically from there, we got in contact with a couple of universities. So one in the UK and one in Greece, and they sent us enough money to buy 2 Raspberry Pis. So 1 Raspberry Pi each. And a Raspberry Pi is just like a mini computer, it costs about $30. But just to demonstrate that people on the other side of the world could buy computers for school children who are on the other side of the planet, but with no middleman in between. It's just been able to purchase it. But anyway, at the time, our bursar didn't really like it, so she caught wind of it and contacted the department and said, you're not allowed to spend that money because we don't understand what Bitcoin is. And it still blows my mind to this day. But basically, to my principal's credit, we had we had a lot of back and forth with the department until they said, yes, you can spend up to $250 worth of Bitcoin. And because it's deflationary instead of inflationary, we're allowed to buy a lot more Raspberry Pis by that stage. But we also had a really nice philanthropist come through at the time and gave us 21 Bitcoins to build a STEAM center. So what we did with that money was, instead of me or the principal or teachers saying what we wanted with that money, we actually used the funds to build an open source STEAM center, so out of shipping containers. We let the kids vote on how those funds were allocated. So basically, you guys have probably done like a Survey Monkey or something like that before, which are pretty good. But you can't really trust the data because it's on, like that diagram before, on a centralized server belong to somebody else. When you do a blockchain vote, you can 100% trust, it's a trustless network, that the data is from who it's meant to be from. So we did that, and the kids broke down the data or what they wanted into different groups. So we've got augmented reality, robotics, virtual reality, drones, androids, and makerspace equipment. And the results were something really cool. So we've got these amazing spaces, one dedicated to virtual reality, and we got an outdoor space as well, sort of that lets all the kids come outside for a bit of a makerspace as well. Augmented reality, we've got a makerspace container as well, where the kids do a lot of 3D printing, but also physically making things as well. This down here is an IPFS cluster that we're building with a 3D printer, but with a bunch of Androids on a stick, which was a couple of weeks ago. It's a lot of fun. We've got a blockchain container, so looking at financial literacy. We've literally got, this is Satoshi's white paper, we've got that up on the walls in there, and we've got some ledgers so the kids actually learn how to use hardware wallets, and we do a lot with like building full nodes and that sort of thing. And we've also got a container that we're turning into, with the Foundation for Young Australians, who I was meeting with this morning, dedicated to esports. So the future of work being esports being a big industry, we've got a space sort of dedicated to that. We're going to run an event around that. So pretty cool altogether. But we've also got a virtual learning space in Minecraft. So we've got a 24/7 virtual learning space in Minecraft where the kids can come in, and it doesn't have to be in school hours. It can be now. There probably is kids in world now. But it's not just our school. So we've got about 15 schools all around the world, all connected, and the kids do everything from history to literacy to numeracy, geography, all sorts of things, coding. So that's all JavaScript coding there. It was a really cool project, international project we did last year. It had about 5 schools involved, where the kids created their favorite characters from their favorite book and then wrote a narrative next to the character. It was really interesting to see. There was actually an Italian school that got involved, and they actually wrote their narratives in Italian next to their characters. It was really, really good. Cool. We've also got Minecraft in VR. So all this stuff here that the kids have built, so you go in world, and there's all sorts of amazing structures and different things that the students have built and different schools have collaborated on. But you can walk around in that. So in this photo, you can sort of see down the back, we've got some HTC Vives. So the kids can walk around in structures, and we've got some Oculus Rifts as well, in structures that they've built. So you can have that full immersive experience in something that you've created with somebody at another school. And it's really, really cool. We also decided probably about a year or 2 ago now, after doing so much collaboration with video conferencing, kind of meeting up once a week, like we built the school of the future that some kids at my previous school and this school thought would be really cool to build in Minecraft, kind of meeting up once a week and chatting about it. We thought we do this so much, why don't we just leave it up 24/7? So we've got a bit of a magic mirror in the Enigma portal where the kids can just walk up and talk to each other. And it doesn't have to be a prescribed time. It's just, okay, cool, you're in New Zealand, I'm in Australia, let's go and build something together. So they can, it's pretty open like that, which is, I think, really important. So project, so we do a lot of PBL within the school. This is my favorite. This is what I was working on this afternoon. One of the kids turned me into a Game Boy game last week, which just made my day, or made my year really. But we're actually building legit Game Boy games, so you can get a cartridge and everything, code the game. The kids are writing the narratives for the game, and you can build it out with this new software that's available on GitHub. But we're using this, so I got all the year 4s this term, building their games out, and some of the games are really, really cool. We're using this for RocketShoes. So once they're finished and they're really happy with the game they've made, instead of it just sitting on a server at our school or sitting on Amazon or Google servers over in California, it's going to be on IPFS and on the blockchain. So they're going to own their game and own it forever. So it's really, really cool to see. Building IPFS nodes, so you'll kind of get a feeling of what this is after I go through it. But yeah, the kids are really excited about actually building out some of the infrastructure for housing that stuff they're making as well. We do a lot with 360-degree photography and VR with Google Expeditions as well. So you can actually visit our school virtually if you want to. It only takes a cheap phone and a cheap headset, or a cardboard headset you can actually make now. We do a lot with VR in general. So if you ever done Scratch, we've got a version of Scratch that works with VR through this company called SmartStone. And basically you can drag and drop and create your virtual worlds and then push it out to your friends. So all 30 headsets can be seeing what you've just created in real time, which is really, really fun. We do a lot, obviously, with building computers and resurrecting computers from the dead. There's a group of year twos, actually, that researched a bunch of different Linux distributions earlier in the year and brought all these old computers that were kind of ready for the bin back to life, which is really nice to see, like 32-bit operating systems running quite well. Do a lot with hardware, AMD versus NVIDIA. This is really fun. So this was from earlier in the year. We built a Raspberry Pi lab. So those Raspberry Pis that we got from the universities overseas, we got more of them. And then the kids actually designed in Tinkercad their cases for them. This is my favorite one. There's a dinosaur head around the Raspberry Pi case. But the kids actually got to do the whole thing. So looking at, all right, what is my case going to look like? What designs am I going to put around it? So this is a really cool one as well. So a creeper from Minecraft. And they built this whole infrastructure as well. So looking at cabling, which is a bit of a mess there, but I kind of like it. And the operating system as well. So they found, this was so cool, they found that you could run Chromos, and a Chrome box cost about $300, but kids found you could run Chromos on a Raspberry Pi, which costs about $30. So saving a lot of money and getting something that's just as good. And it's more fun. We do system imaging. This is actually a group of year ones doing some system imaging in the school, which is, we do that from as young as possible. Again, bringing back some more computers to life. Bitcoin VR, we do a lot with as well. So you can actually look at transactions in real time on the blockchain, which it's going to be more and more important because proof of existence, which we'll go into with RocketShoes, it's not just for finance, it's for a lot of things, in particular education. Building full nodes. So like I said, there's a whole bunch of cool projects you can do around blockchain technology within your schools. We've actually got a Casa node, a full node, full Ethereum node, a Bitcoin node, and a Steam node, and a NEM one as well. And really fun projects that you can do, and it can take a whole term to actually get it up and running, but it's cool to get it going in the end. This is probably worth going into. So when I started at the school, we had a terrible internet connection, but we got this screen a lot. You guys have probably seen this before. But literally the department gave us a 20 up, 20 down connection for, 400 students. It's just ridiculous. It's not fit for one person at home, let alone a whole school. So we kind of took it upon ourselves to first set up a Cisco group. So this boy here he's got a really high IQ. And his mum asked me, was there anything he could do at like a high school level that he's not already doing at school? And I was like, well, not really, but we could get in the Cisco material and see if he's interested. And Cisco is something you don't sort of do till tertiary, till university or TAFE. And I did my CCNP and CCNA at Swinburne, so I thought, he might be interested. So he took it home and was interested, and then we started sort of looking at the curriculum. Then his friends organically wanted to get involved, so we ended up creating the world's youngest Cisco Academy. And the kids actually helped then build out an infrastructure around the school. So we're literally doing Cisco engineering right from year 2 right up to year 6, and built a better network for the school. So the infrastructure is really good, and the kids have built that from the ground up. Consensus of content. So this is really important. And this is something that we've been looking at for the last couple of years, but it's coming up pretty quickly. But next year, around mid-next year, I think it is, the knowledge doubling curve, so IBM's knowledge doubling curve basically means that every 12 hours, knowledge globally is going to double. So if you think about that from an education context, it's quite daunting. And a lot of people are fearful of that, but I don't think it's anything to be scared of. I think it's actually quite cool, and it's an opportunity, I think. And what I think the best way to handle it is this thing here. So consensus of content is what we've sort of coined it as at We're on a Park, and we're putting something around esports specifically for that, where students can create their own curriculum. And we're actually cheekily creating a curriculum and getting the kids to vote on it, but the kids create the curriculum and the teachers have to sit an exam for it. So it should be quite interesting to see how that plays out. But the premise is basically that students get to have a say in what they want to study, and because there's so much stuff out there, we can do that in an authenticated way on the blockchain. So using Ethereum blockchain, we're doing some consensus of content voting on that. And if you're interested, I can show you more later on. But we're also going one-to-one smartphones in the school, which is a huge point of contention. Wasn't so much at the start of the year, but they banned phones, which is insane. But basically, we're doing it for a number of reasons. One, obviously, RocketShoes we built for touch first. So, and basically creating a distributed network of interconnected devices instead of stuff belonging to a third party on the other side of the planet. You can create a network of phones where you're serving up data much more efficiently than you would be from going back and forth to Dropbox servers on the other side of the world every 5 seconds. But also, I mean, obviously there's augmented reality, virtual reality, and video making. And like, these are the things that the kids do every day. And yeah, it's crazy to me that they're getting blocked. But we are having a conversation with Department of Ed higher ups this Friday, so that might change. One of the things that I mentioned though was building for touch first or mobile first, and that's essentially moving from here to something like this. So a lot of these applications are looking at utilizing infrastructure like that, particularly IPFS, which is what we're building off. But this is a good visual to think about how we're moving, because most people are familiar with these applications here. These are fast becoming obsolete for these here. So if you want to take a screenshot of that, you're more than welcome to, but it's worth just having a visual instead of just me talking about different applications or dApps that are out there. We also use Dogecoin a lot in the school, so looking at financial literacy, and basically it acts exactly the same as Bitcoin, and you can kind of get an understanding of how the infrastructure works, private keys, public keys, what a hash is, and all the rest of it. But essentially, it doesn't matter if you lose it, and because it's not really worth anything. And Doge is a cool internet meme that the kids love, so it's a lot of fun. Oh, yeah. Twitter's obsolete. There's a cool dApp. So that list of dApps I had before, one of them is called Peepeth. And I probably like this more so than a lot of the dApps that are out there, essentially just because it interfaces with Twitter. So you're not giving up your Twitter, but it just means if your Twitter does disappear, or if Twitter disappears tomorrow, all your stuff's still on the Ethereum blockchain with Peepeth. Dropbox is obsolete. Storage is a really cool application that it's akin to IPFS. I think its development's sort of slowed down a bit for it, but I really like it. And last year we built out a storage server that it essentially shares out spare hard drive space for storage tokens, and you can spend those tokens to back up your stuff. And we did that for our Minecraft server, and it was really geeky but really fun at the same time. And it was Aaron there who actually he brought in parts from home to build it, and he actually went home and started mining Ethereum as well with some of the stuff that we were learning at school. So yeah, it's our server backed up. Also built a game earlier this year, so it's a game, if you guys want, I can give you a free copy of it. It's $10 on Steam, but essentially it teaches you how to mine Bitcoin, and it was first built with a narrative that wasn't very kid friendly. And I contacted these guys after I saw the article. I was like, "Oh my god, this is awesome! Can we get a copy?" And they said, "Yeah, but the narrative's that someone's been kidnapped and you got to get Bitcoin to like save them." I'm like, "Oh, okay." But they said, "Well, you could if you want to. The kids could write an education version." So they did, and they wrote a really cool one, and it wasn't about anyone being kidnapped. And like, the game's called Crypto Crisis, so my mind immediately went to, the school's getting shut down, we're going to have to save it. but the kids were like, well, no, why don't we just build the school of the future that we want? And I'm like, that is much better. So they did that, and then it's been released, and it's actually, you can buy it on Steam, but I've got a bunch of keys, so if you guys want, it's actually got our school logo in there as well, which is really cool. Yeah, there it is. It's really quite tough. This, oh yeah, NAPLAN's obsolete as well. You've probably seen a lot of the news about that. This, I would say that because this day, this is Maheen in the middle here. She's actually building out a website for this international thinking conference that's all over the world, and we've got the next one in 2021 in Melbourne. And these guys asked if I would do the website, and I said, well, I got no time, but I've got a really smart girl, and she's in year 5, and she could probably do it. So she did, and she didn't. I CC'd her on some emails, and she stayed up all night before this. Like her mum said, she didn't sleep before the meeting, and they were all super impressed. But the irony was, we were going back to a NAPLAN test, day, like straight from here. So I was like, oh my god, like real world learning to the most boring thing you could possibly imagine. So yeah, I think NAPLAN's obsolete. Instagram obsolete as well. This is a really cool application, and I think it's actually live now. I don't think you need invites for it. So if you jump on iOS or Android, if you type in Textile, it essentially creates an IPFS node on your phone, which is what we're going to do for RocketShoes as well. It's on our roadmap. But basically, you can upload photos and share them with your friends, but you get a mnemonic seed, meaning that you have like a private key where you own your content, so it doesn't belong to somebody like this, like Zuckerberg. It's 100% yours for now and forever, and they've built out a really cool interface. So definitely worth checking out. YouTube obsolete. Now I'm just going to play this video. It's quite short. It's a interview. So it's about it's about a year ago now. I emailed. There's a man by the name of Andreas Antonopoulos, who's probably the most famous man in the world that you've never heard of. But me and the kids watch his videos all the time. To put it in perspective, he gets like $1 million to go and do a presentation somewhere, because he's really articulate and breaks down really complex ideas and makes them palatable for people to understand. But anyway, I emailed him and said, is there any chance that we could get an interview with you? And his secretary got back to us and said, yep, and he'll do it for free. So it's like a full hour interview, and the kids asked all these amazing questions. But this was the best one, I thought, or the best answer anyway. I really loved it.
Okay, so Kieran, we're not getting your sound because I think you need to be sharing your screen. When you do share screen, you have to select audio from this computer.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, so no, we didn't hear the audio. So the best.
Okay, all right. I'll just talk about what he said. That's all right.
If you can actually share your screen and click the button that says share audio from this computer, and
okay.
that will do it.
I'll just tell it. It's quick anyway. Essentially, what he said was the answer to the student's question was to use, because the question is how do I stop my YouTube videos from getting deleted? Because YouTube keeps deleting my videos every time I upload them. How do we stop this from happening? And that's happening to him because I think he was doing his Enigma mission, which is like a self-directed learning mission on gaming. So he was uploading content that probably was copyrighted and kept getting deleted. We've had kids doing stuff on GMO foods and really interesting projects that have been deleted once they've uploaded to YouTube as well. So it's a real concern. It's like if Google disagrees with what you're saying, they can just delete your stuff. It's not really fair. Essentially, Andreas says the best way to think about that is just keep using YouTube, and it's essentially like writing a horse to go and build a car. And I was like, he puts it much more articulately than that. And I was like, yeah, that's really perfect. But essentially, that's what we're doing with RocketShoes. So we're building out, if you can sort of take anything away from this, and it's probably a lot of information to take in, but node computing is the end of the cloud. So instead of using the cloud, we're going to have interconnected devices that are much more efficient and secure. So you've seen how many hacks have been, even just this week, I think there's been banks and everything hacked. It's been crazy. That's because we're relying on third parties. So we need to stop doing that, but make it easy for people as well. So efficiency and security, and we can do that now. We've got the tools to do it. So this is our application, and it's called RocketShoes. And I think I'll hand it over to Matt to go through these slides, and we'll give a bit of a demo.
Yep, thanks, Kieran. I might grab the share off you and start sharing from my screen just so I can control our slides. And then
Cool.
when we get to the demo part, I'll get you to do the demo, so I'll switch the share again.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Let's share that one. And you should be able to see my screen now. Somebody nod. Is that coming up? Yeah.
Yeah, looking good. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. So I'll take you on my journey, which is, as Lynn said, quite tertiary education focused, to give you an understanding of sort of where I'm coming from and how I see the future of educational technology. I'm going to keep to time as much as possible because I've got, as you might have picked up earlier in the conversation, a nearly 7-year-old who's here and needs to go to bed soon, so I have to put her to bed. So if I go too fast, I'm really sorry about that. But one of the things that has really exercised my mind for the last few years, actually many years really, is what the future of educational technology is. I think we spend quite a lot of time in disciplines like yours and in positions like mine and others who are here thinking about this question, what is the future? And it's always a really difficult thing to sort of try and think about where are we going to without having the experience of it yet. It's quite a tricky position to be in. So I'm quite interested when people try to take on this kind of a topic. And one of the things that I've been interested in reading recently is, or rereading recently really, is an article about that topic, the next generation digital learning environment, and this quite comprehensive study of digital learning environments that was done under EDUCAUSE that had a number of findings about digital learning environments and what they are lacking really and what the future probably needs to be like. And three of those things sort of really struck a chord for me in terms of thinking about what we were doing with RocketShoes, and I just wanted to mention them to you. One of them is interoperability. I don't think educational technology in general, and particularly learning management systems, are really all that good at interoperability. They tend to be quite really big systems and they like you to connect into them for a single sign-on and things like that, but they don't interoperate very well with the rest of your life. And the places where you want them to sometimes can be quite tricky to do things. And I think that's something that has been bothering me as someone particularly who's interested in mobile learning and learning in the ways that students would like to be able to learn. And I mean by that modes as well as pedagogies. And then there's this idea of personalization. We've had all these tools that are supposed to be really good for personalization, but they do tend to end up being another platform that you need to interoperate with, and they tend to sort of end up having lots of data in them, and then they also don't really interoperate all that well. So I think personalization, I totally agree with these findings. It's another really important part. Oops, I'll stop trying to change slides too early. And the third one is collaboration, something that we all strive for in teaching and learning, but which digital learning environments have yet to really prove to be all that good at. And likewise, I'm always fascinated by the Horizon reports that have been up until now coming out from the NMC, it's been taken over by EduCause now, but they always come up with these really exciting ideas about technologies that are on the way, like, analytics. Learning analytics has been the big thing for a while, and then we've got artificial intelligence and maker spaces and all those sorts of things. And I've been involved in the workshops that come up with the ideas for these, and it's all very exciting, but I'm always left with this question of how you can actually do it. And I'm also left with the question about how educational institutions can remain relevant in a really fast changing world. And so these questions of how remain with me, which is, I guess, perhaps why I've been so intrigued in working in the space of building some of these things and trying to think about how you would build those things. But I also think in the broader educational sense, we need to sort of always return to the question of how the experience for students can remain relevant, and it's a question that I like to think about. And I think a way that we often fall back on to think about how to change things is to return to the technology and to feel as though technology is moving along, and have this sort of teleological view of it, that you're able to drive change through the use of technology. And I think that can be a bit of a trap. If we think about the sorts of technologies that have had a lot of promise, and we really critically analyse just how far they've come, you can pretty quickly see that we might not have come as far as we might have thought we would have come, say, in the last 20 to 25 years, a time which I've been involved in looking at ed tech. And I still remember when mobile learning was called M-learning, and it was going to change everything. And then still in 2019, if you go to your average university, you still can't do simple things like enroll with a mobile device, things like, your everyday experience. Virtual reality, I remember 1995, just, pretty, as though it was pretty recent, when virtual reality markup language was invented by Mark Pesce, and we were going to have virtual reality in the browser and all those sorts of things. And it sort of did, but then it didn't really take off in terms of the educational reasons for it. And I still remember very clearly the MOOC fad when it broke in 2012, and Sebastian Thrun told everybody that the MOOC world was going to change the whole face of higher education. There were going to be 10 institutions left in the world, that kind of thing. And I'm also interested in the fact that there's if you look at the effect of educational technologies and how I can't help you, sweet. I'm sorry. The effect of educational technologies and how far down this curve, the SAMR curve, they are, you often find that things are really in the substitution and augmentation modes rather than the really fully redesigned mode, which is something that we did at La Trobe while I was there, and it is quite telling just how we haven't come all that far. So I guess that's led me to think about the nature of technology and the fact that we could think about everything in a completely different way. We could think about turning everything inside out in terms of the environments that we're creating for students. We're not necessarily bound to these environments that are containing everything inside them. And I also like this diagram. In fact, I think, in fairness, I might have used this one first, Kieran, about the nature of the centralised world that we live in under Web 2, and the fact that if we thought about the world of technology as not necessarily containing everything that we need to do, we think more about it spanning across our entire lives, it would probably look more like the distributed model on the right-hand side of this and less like a centralised model, which, after all, is kind of a pedagogic model that we're kind of hooked on as teachers being the font of knowledge and that kind of thing. So I really got fixed on this idea of thinking about how distributed systems could work. I also think that the principles of decentralization are playing out in the way that students tend to study and in the way that horizon thoughts about how we're working or are going to work play out. So if you look at this stuff by Gartner, the very top line there talks about, for example, we working as a primary organizational model. And it's for us in the startup space, and I think for many organizations, in large organizations, it's much more relevant these days to have these ensembles of workers that change and get applied to different problems and then are drawn together around different problems and move on in different ways. And this idea of we working, okay, I'll be with you in a sec. I'm sorry. Someone wants something. Really sorry. So what are we doing in terms of our educational systems to prepare students for that reality? If they're moving into those work environments and they need to work in that way, how are we making it possible for them to do that, and how are we introducing them to the tools, techniques, and social patterns to be able to make that work? And then in the technical sense, in the technology sense, there are these technologies that Kieran's introduced earlier in the conversation, interplanetary file system, which we're very interested and excited about, but there are others in that category that look at creating a permanent and distributed web. You can think about it as at the level of HTTP, if you're familiar with the web protocols that underpin the web these days. Interplanetary file system is aimed at replacing that level of protocol. And the blockchain, being a distributed ledger system, is very important in a sense of a way to make decisions about and transactions about any kind of data, any kind of capital, or anything that you hold value in, if you believe in an idea of a decentralized and consensus-driven model. And it is going to change the face of the way that we do things like banking. And I guess what we're interested in RocketShoes is how that plays out in terms of the education space, which is where we come to part of the value proposition for RocketShoes is thinking about whether or not the data models that we use are really up to date for the way that we want education to work. And our thesis is that they're not. They're really built for a different era. And if we think about issues like student intellectual property, it is becoming more and more apparent and just more relevant these days to talk about student ownership. In an educational sense, it's also very important to think about student agency, and those two are very closely linked for me. And I think what you heard from Kieran was a school model that's built around this idea of student agency as being the most, as the primary sort of mode. There are also practical concerns with the way that data is housed in these systems that are managed or ultimately responsible, the responsibility of third parties. It's that our data sort of is all over the place. It's controlled in different ways. A lot of data ends up being on thumb drives or on people's personal hard drives as a result when they want to control it. And if they move on, then that data moves with them. And as a result, it's very difficult to find things and manage it. It's not as though we all put everything into a single cloud service, for example, and we have a way to have federated search over it. It doesn't quite work that way. And then education systems need to address privacy and data protection. I think I sort of covered that in the first part, but it's becoming more apparent, and there are even people protesting about those sorts of things. So Kieran's going to demonstrate RocketShoes just to give you a feel for it, but in terms of the sort of solutions base that we're looking at with RocketShoes, what we want to be able to do is to allow students to have agency, and RocketShoes provides that in a real sense because students actually keep control of their data. And just to explain, RocketShoes we call it a platform only because that's the Web 2 terminology that we're all familiar with. the platforms typically have particular properties in a technical sense. And one of them is that you sort of have data inside them. And actually RocketShoes is not like that. We don't house the data inside the platform. We actually house access to the data for the individuals. We can't see the data that's inside of it. We can't use your private keys to access it and do something with it. We are like middleware to connect your data that's existing in this thing called IPFS and on the blockchain, and put it into the context that makes most sense to you in an educational sense. So in a way, we're sort of an unplatform, but because that's quite a hard message to give people when they don't have a notion of what a Web3 platform could be, we do refer to it as a platform. And then we use decentralized storage to allow this more advanced way to navigate content, which we'll explain perhaps when we look at the orbits page, Kieran. But the part of the concept with that is that you actually are then able to trust the platform, so you can put more of your stuff into it, so you can then search it, tag it, do things with it, and share it when you want to, make it available to people when you want to, and keep it private when you want to. And that also, we believe, allows institutions to be driving towards GDPR compliance in a more root and branch way as well. If you're not familiar with GDPR, it's probably too much to explain the whole of it, but it's data protection. I'm sure that Greta knows all about it. For example, it's very, very, my wife's from Holland and I'm in Holland a lot, and everybody's talking about GDPR compliance. So it's coming to Australia, and it's already relevant for institutions who are delivering to students who are in Europe, but it's a harbinger of the way that we have to think about data protection these days. So, and this is perhaps a slide that gives you an indication of the very high level view of it. Essentially, we've got what we think of as a digital asset wallet, where you do all the stuff where you manage your own data, where you're able to search for things, you tag them, you can share them and things like that. It's very much like an existing app or a web app. Technically, it's a distributed app or DApp. And then underneath it, these two layers, which are probably, between Kieran and I, we've probably said enough about the distributed file system and the blockchain. The architecture looks like this. I think I won't go into the details of this architecture, except to say, when you're building something new like this, the way to do it these days really is to base it on an applications programming interface. In other words, a way for other programs to access the functionality of your software instead of creating a standalone app. And that's been the approach that we have taken. And we've also taken a very modular approach, which is that bottom box at the bottom here, saying any of the things that are in here, like the way that we store the files, it should be able to be accessed from a different file storage system if we chose to change it, and we should be able to make it available as to programmers to change up that storage mechanism. So, for example, if you wanted to use storage, one of the other ones that Kieran mentioned, you'll be able to use our API and then craft the piece that would connect to it there. You should be able to change out the blockchain. There are many different kinds of blockchain, like Ethereum and things like that. So we've created everything in a modular way. And likewise, we can't design just around one learning management system. Even though we think that learning management systems are on their way out, we have to make sure that this works with all of the learning management systems that are out there. So we have to make it compatible with each of them, which means in the design of it, we create it in an agnostic way, so that it's able to be changed out with other learning management systems. There's work involved in all these things, but your architecture has to support the concept that you're not tied to one. We've built it around Google Classroom because Google publishes its APIs, and we're able to access those, and we're able to see exactly how to do things and then build out the functionality. We are about halfway through building the platform. We've got to a stage where we have a working prototype, a minimum viable product, or MVP, and we're in the pilot phase, which is highlighted here, which I'm pleased to tell you your subject is the first tertiary institution subject to be offered a pilot. We do have others in waiting for the teaching period. There's one at Monash that's queued up, but you are the first cabs off the rank. So I'm very happy that you have volunteered to do that, and be aware that it is a product that's under development. So you will see all of the nooks and crannies, but that's why we want to trial it. We want to understand how it could be better, and we want to understand how you would like us to build it. And that's the opportunity from your point of view, I suppose. And then from there, we'll be building out other things. So just to see, I think this is an important slide to consume just quickly, just to see there's functionality that's not yet built that we already have on the road map. And that has to do with probably more institutional control over content. When you're thinking about building lots and lots of content, you need to be able to manage it, put all this data over here, that kind of stuff, or search for all the instances of medieval moths across the institution, whatever you want to look for. That kind of functionality is coming later, as well as some of the social stuff. So it'll look and feel a bit more like Peepeth or Twitter when it's finished. So you'll be able to share content with other people. You'll sort of have to imagine that stuff at the moment. And then later on, we'll be building the enterprise ready version, which is where you build the admin side and you build the back end side that allows people to do clever things with how to integrate and things like that. So that's not there yet, but that probably doesn't impact your usage of it that much. All right, all of that is leading up to the point where I'll stop my share now and I'll ask Kieran to take over and do the demo, and I might turn off my camera so I can talk to
Cool
my
thing. Can you guys all see that? Yep.
Yes, it's coming through. Thanks, Kieran.
Awesome. So yeah, Matt mentioned we're building out for Google Classroom. One, because the APIs are really good, but two, because my school uses it. So if you've ever tried to introduce new technology into a school, it's always really hard. So we kind of don't want to do that. What we want to do is build a storage layer that talks to that, whatever LMS is used in the school, but allows students to own the content from there. So this is a mock account. Student's called Pigsy Banks. If anyone watches Monkey Magic, you probably recognize the face there. But basically, this is Google Classroom view, and there's a bunch of classes that have sort of just been put together by us. The really cool thing with this is if we go then into RocketShoes, which is SSO, meaning single sign-on with your Google account, all that stuff that's in here in your Google Classroom is automatically brought across into RocketShoes. Now, what I want to do, and this is tricky doing things in real time, is going to add Pigsy to, so we've got a classroom code. Has everyone used Google Classroom before? I'm assuming most people, yeah. It's pretty straightforward. Like it's kind of hard to get things wrong with it. It's like kind of point and click. But joining a class, you literally just enter a class code. So it's a class code for this Game Boy dev group that I have. And it's been really, really exciting. But we're going to join this. And that's what it looks like here. That's the view. It's a bunch of work, whatever. But the exciting thing is, let's refresh. We've got to give it a second. Actually, you know what I should do? Just so you guys get the idea of what I mean by SSO. If I go back, so this is what the sign-in screen looks like. You click on Launch Application, and then sign in with Google. Now, for future ref, this won't be the only option. So we'll have like Microsoft, what's some other one, Edmodo, like whatever SSO you can think of, we want to build out for them. Obviously, there are things like Moodle, Blackboard, all the rest of it. But then moving forward, looking at doing a decentralized version of SSO as well. So having decentralized ID, which is in the works at the moment. So that's on our roadmap as well. So click on sign in. Now this takes a little bit because it's talking to IPFS servers and the blockchain, and it's pulling in all that data from here. So you just have to wait a second. And I've found with my account, it takes even longer just because I'm the admin for the school. So I've got like absolutely everyone in the school. So I just get a whole bunch of data. Okay, so just join that. So that Game Boy class is now in Pigsy's RocketShoes wallet. We can go into that, and it's got a list of all the assignments. So these are the ones we've been doing the last couple of weeks. So create your game story. It's a YouTube video, so you can click on that and watch it if you want to. Drag and drop to submit work, so we can grab a file. So we'll say this is a character, upload. And this is really cool because it's doing it to IPFS and the blockchain, but also submitting to Classroom as well. So if we were in my account, we could see that. So that'll pop up to me. But this is the other really cool thing. So you kind of understand that. So the important part about this is that you understand it's agnostic to the learning management system of the school. So the kids could leave my school and then say go to a high school that's using some completely other system, but all their stuff is still with them in RocketShoes. And so this part doesn't matter at all. They could have the world's worst LMS, but we could still talk to it and they could still keep that stuff. Now, this is the other really cool thing. So we have what we call orbits. So you guys are probably familiar with hashtags in RocketShoes world and IPFS world. We call them orbits. So what the kids can do is a whole bunch of stuff that's been submitted already, but so my kids who are building their games at the moment, when they're finished, they'll go, oh, there's already a hashtag Game Boy RPG, cool. So they'll go add, we'll use that tag, I don't know, something. Okay, so we'll do Game Boy, grab our file, so we'll pretend that's the completed game. So it's agnostic to the file type as well. So we're using pictures here just because they're quick, but you could be uploading a video or a Minecraft world or the Game Boy files that we're uploading, or it could be anything. Some CAD files for 3D printing, it doesn't really matter. But the concept is that you keep it. So we'll do add category, add. So it's uploading to IPFS, and then we get, what was that called? Oh, we can edit that. Game Boy down the bottom. So we can go edit. So we'll call it my game. Whoop. Game. Can save that. That's all pretty cool. Now, so once you've uploaded that, once you're really happy that this is the file that I want to keep and I want to keep it forever, this little key on the side here with submit. If you click on that, it's submitting it to the blockchain. So it's putting a hash. At the moment on the NEM blockchain, we're looking at migrating to something called the Ethereum blockchain, which is a lot more robust in what you can do with it. And this is a live view of the Ethereum blockchain. But it takes a few minutes to submit because blockchains are notoriously slow just because they authenticate without people sort of in the middle. So once that goes through, we'll do one that's already come up. You'll get a timestamp. So this is one that's gone up previously. If you click on that, it'll take you to a search. Now, we had some issues with the NEM blockchain just recently. So you can see this up the top here. That's the unique key or the hash of that content that you've uploaded. But the search function for NEM is not working at the moment for some reason, which is really annoying. So you just kind of have to imagine the hash is coming up. So a transaction would look something like one of these. So you have your public key and an address, and there should be a hash of that content, which is why we're going to probably migrate to Ethereum, but we probably want your feedback on what you think about that as well. So yeah, there you have it. So we've got all our stuff sort of coming in from this learning management system, a wallet where you can upload Orbit. So this could be for anything that you're doing within your school, but the kids can then go off to whatever institution it is. If it's 2 primary schools that they're going to that have totally different LMSs, they should be able to keep their data with them. So there you have it. Does that kind of make sense to everyone? Should we do some questions?
Yeah, thanks, Kieran. Look, I think people have probably reached the stage now where they're going, yeah, this is great, but
but they want to go to bed, probably.
Brenda says making sense on the fringe. Matt says it's the honeypot effect. Fiona wants to know how she can invest. There you go. You have an investor.
Nice.
So look, let's throw the floor open. Any questions? There's no right or wrong question at this point. The only bad question is one that's not answered, I think, not asked. Lynn, do you want to say something?
Oh, look, I'd just like to say what interests me from a digital citizenship perspective, which is something that I'd taught for many years and I'm still very passionate about. And that is that, you know, when you're looking at this, like platforms like RocketShoes, it's the digital asset management is now, as individuals, where we have the opportunity to actually control our own data. And so I think that's going back to what you were talking about, Matt, with, you know, legislation in Europe. And we'll get that trickle effect over here. But what I really like about it, and Kieran, one thing I would really be interested to hear about from your perspective as a teacher of primary school students, is how did they understand the concept of IP and them controlling their own digital assets and them managing that? I'd really like to get your perspective, because
that's a really good question.
If primary kids can do it, adults should be able to understand it too.
Nah, it's the other way around. Kids are easier. I think, yeah, it's really interesting with these sort of concepts. Like, yeah, I find it's easier with a group of 10-year-olds than it is with a group of 30-year-olds, but it's weird. But I think that the short answer to that is not all students are going to care about IP, and it's not interesting to everyone. But students that are can go into it deeper. So we've got a lot of kids at my school that are already interested in blockchain technology and what you can do with it and the financial side of things. And cool, like we've been talking about sort of building out, like looking at proof of existence is just what I just demonstrated there. I've been looking at this for years, so it's really cool to actually have it. It's really exciting, and the kids are sort of into it as well. But not all staff are going to be on board either. So I think that what we're building is something where they don't necessarily need to care until that point comes when they need their data back. And then it's like, oh yeah, now I see what you guys have built. Like now it kind of makes sense. So for the students that do really care, they can go deep into it. But for the ones that don't, we've made it as easy as possible. So they're just using Google Classroom, right? Like it doesn't have any sort of effect on what their day-to-day is. But when they leave the school, like most schools delete stuff at the end of the year when the kids go. So, or they quote unquote archive it, which means delete. Unless they have someone really nice at the school like me who keeps everything and and makes sure the kids can obtain it. But most schools don't have that. So with this, you don't need to rely on somebody like me to have that stuff. The kids can get it regardless, and it's not reliant on any sort of institution either. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, Matt, whether you could just add one extra piece to the puzzle here, is how this kind of blockchain technology is also being used to support digital identity management. And so once again, that's a digital citizenship issue, but very important global issue. Could you just sort of mention that? Because I think they work hand in hand.
Yeah, digital identity is one of the really key pieces that will really change the way that we think about our own stuff. So at the moment, we have a lot of centralized data, digital identity systems, don't we? So things like logging in with Google ID or logging in with Apple ID, logging in with Active Directory, which you may or may not recognize that you do, but if you've got a Microsoft 365 account or you use many systems that use today leverage Microsoft technology, and they're centralized, and they were centralized for very good reasons, for very good technical reasons. You need to be able to connect it to other things, so you have a centralized server and you connect things to the server and everything's good. But what a lot of people are coming around to thinking is that we can leverage these decentralized technologies to put the user back at the center, so that their identity is controlled by them, and then we put that into different contexts. So to give you an idea, if you implemented My Health with a decentralized identity model, what you would do is you put the patient's ID in their control. You wouldn't have a government sort of centered system to control the identity, and then they would be able to move from context to context, and they would be able to say, okay, this identity connects to things like my driver's license and my passport to authenticate me in this context. And I can then expose that identity through a token to a particular authority or to gain access to a particular, say, medical record or something like that. And I could then choose to share that with someone else through a private public key model. Now, there are organizations, and Microsoft is actually surprisingly one of them, who are recognizing that decentralized ID is the way of the future, because they don't necessarily want to be the keepers of your identity. They want you to be able to get access to their services, but they don't necessarily need to be the ones who are the guardians of your ID. And I think as that idea spreads, it's actually quite a viral idea, because it means you can have a trustless way of identifying people. Another example that I think is a really good one, our technology partners are called Type Human, and they're very socially, they're focused on social needs and social enterprise type projects. And their biggest other client apart from us is the Red Cross. And the reason the Red Cross is interested in decentralized ID is so that refugees can move across borders, and they don't necessarily have their identity documents like you and I might. They don't necessarily keep their passport, or they may have to give it up at the border, or they may not be able to bring it with them. So how do you then reinstitute identity for people who are without paperwork and then cannot trust? You don't have a trusted government if they've come from a war-torn country. So the project that they're doing is actually generating a decentralized ID mechanism so that they can take their identity with them across different contexts and establish who they are, so that when they show up at a new country, or when they perhaps even move back to their old country, they can carry with them their identity. So they're just a couple of examples, My Health and the Red Cross example, that show you why decentralized ID is a pretty good idea for solving some of the problems of centralized ID.
Yeah, I think your Red Cross example is a really powerful one that everyone can relate to when you start to think about your personal data and being able to, if you're being put in a situation where you don't have access to that documentation, that you have access to your documentation in the blockchain network. So there's some questions there, Julie. Do you want to just follow up with some of the questions there that people have asked?
Yeah, sure. Oh, I might just go to Fiona's question, because this one takes it back to Kieran. How Warana were able to create this opportunity for the kids. What sort of organisation?
I was just reading that as you were reading it out. Yeah, I think with the school, we got a really awesome principal who is really forward thinking, and that really helps. In terms of changes. The way we've built out RocketShoes in particular, it means you can sort of focus on those key people within the school that want to be on board, and it doesn't necessarily have to be everyone. So realistically, we could do this for any school. So you just sort of pick out those, change makers within the school and work with them, which is what I've done, because I've learned from the past that if you try and do things top down, it just doesn't happen. People go, the amount of times I've heard, I don't want to learn something new within school walls would just blow your mind. So I didn't want to have to do that. So I think the way we've built out is really the smart way forward.
Great. And Gretch has asked Matthew, actually, this is related to the work that we're doing in this subject as well on digital scholarship. So we're reading a lot of the work of Martin Weller and other authors around digital, networked and open. And how do you see this technology impacting on that openness and that publication, research, etc.? So
two thoughts there. Firstly, it is actually a really well-established problem that you can have collusion among academics. By the way, I was an academic until a year ago. Academics in the publishing sphere, and I'm sure you've kind of covered off on this in the course then, around the problem with circles being built up so that you can have these online systems, and then people can deliberately game them to get publication points, etc. I think blockchain is an obvious way to get around that, because you can require everybody to publish, simply for it to be registered, so that essentially the voting is kind of open and available to be scrutinized at any point. And you can do that in an anonymized way if you wish, by sort of tokenizing identities and things like that. So there's a problem waiting to be solved there. Just to tell you how we're thinking about it, and one of the things that's come up in our journey so far, this might not be all that obvious, but when you think about it, there's people working in climate science in the United States who are really worried at the moment about losing their data. And the reason is one Donald Trump, to put it bluntly. Some of the people who are in contact with Type Human presented a problem to them and said, look, we want a solution that allows us to have our projects save data into a data commons, a research data commons, that if we were defunded because it was deemed that we're doing climate science, it would not be possible to simply just scratch it all. So we offered RocketShoes, the RocketShoes API, to allow that project to take data. And in this case, it's data that participants as co-researchers, you spot an orca, you go to an app, you take a photo, you write down where you saw it, it sends the geolocation and goes into a database, right? So it's pretty straightforward. We don't want the endpoint to be a database that could be defunded, and that's unfortunately, it's quite expensive to upkeep some of these databases on servers and things. So what it does is it just takes the data and it sweeps it into RocketShoes, which immediately just puts it onto the blockchain and into IPFS. And then so the latest version of that, it's just like a spreadsheet. You could think of it just like a spreadsheet. Essentially gets popped into a place where it can't get scratched. And because we've built it as an API, as I was describing before, it means we can do that quite simply. So that's just in a way, it's kind of a pretty easy way to implement a decentralized solution. But I can actually imagine a much bigger project to build a really comprehensive data commons based on these decentralized technologies, and using a decentralized database as well. That would mean that you could store data in a way that can't be stored in a centralized way. So that's an example.
So, Matt, let me get this right. So if you had a group of scientists who they can store their data, each of the articles that they've written about the orcas or whatever it might be, as well as the raw data, can actually be attributed to each of the co-researchers or the researchers in that team. But because it's on blockchain, say for example, normally it might be held in a CSIRO server or something like that. Are you suggesting then that what you could actually be doing with this technology is actually creating an open, not an open repository because it's not anyone's spot, but it's an open network of research that could then never be the control of that or the deletion of that could not be managed by whether it was a government or a corporation or something like that.
Yeah, that last part I think is the nub of it. The first part, it depends on the context, right? So there are ethics around storage of data. There are ethics around access to data. So it depends on the context, but you'd have to build out that functionality. In this case, that was a sort of laid down was there. It's not like the most evil thing we could think of that you could use sightings of orcas might be if you gave them to, I don't know, Japanese whalers or something like that. It's not highly contentious about the storage of data. And this is a raw data storage mechanism. It's a way for us to be sure that the data is not going to just go missing and is accessible to people and able to be analysed in different ways. So that's kind of in a way, it's a proof of concept of a broader idea. But let me give you another example. I've been talking to a guy who's a COO of an autism research CRC. So that he works with other CRCs about autism. And one of the big problems with that research is that people who are participants are sometimes nervous about giving up such personal information. It's highly, private, it's medical in nature. And they want to be able to withdraw their data. They want to be able to offer, the CRCs want to be able to offer participants the opportunity to withdraw their data. So if you base it on a centralized system, it's quite hard to reassure people about that. But imagine allowing them the opportunity to say, you have the private key. And if you at any point decide to remove that private key from our set of private keys, we will no longer be able to see your raw data, the data that you're contributing to the project. I think you can see the kind of thing that I'm getting at with regard to, decentralized data being an attractive option. So Wojciech, who's the guy I was talking to, immediately saw that was a really interesting and useful application of blockchain technology that he hadn't thought about in a research context. So that's another example for you. There's other really worthy projects. I really like what Apple's done with HealthKit in that space to protect people's privacy and to allow research to happen and collect data about, sort of heartbeats and that sort of thing. There's amazing stuff, but it could go one step further if it had this sort of nature of the private key that you were able to manage without ultimately being Tim Cook, who's got responsibility for protecting your privacy, who could potentially be, for example, shoehorned into giving up data at some point by a government. So that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and Fiona's just touched on that in terms of it's individual empowerment rather than the organisations managing that. So
yeah,
I think that's, to me, when I first saw the demo of RocketShoes, I thought, okay, this is completely in an educational setting. This is completely flipping the way that individual students work, whether it's assignments or, prototypes or whatever, are managed, and it's all put in the hands of the individual, and it's not the institution. I think, Kieran, you gave a really good example very early on when I met you, and you said that your school was using some kind of system. It wasn't an LMS, but it was a system where students were working on projects, and then the price of the subscription increased, and the school didn't continue and the kids lost all of their.
Oh yeah. We were using I may as well say it. We were using a company called My Ed, and it was pretty cool. Like they built out software that was like gamification. So like you got a reward at the end of doing it. It's basically a Google Classroom with a reward at the end. It was kind of cool. It was kind of like before Google Classroom was usable. Like, you know, when it was still in its infancy and you couldn't really use it for like intercommunication between schools and that sort of thing. But anyway, yeah, so we had the kids, so we do these things called Enigma missions, which are like self-directed learning for up to 3 years on some amazing projects the kids work on. So everything from feeding homeless people to the problems with Einstein's equations. It's like every crazy thing you can think of, and the kids don't know the stuff inside out. And they have to do a big TED-style presentation, and they get fired questions from the audience. No notes, like they need to know the stuff inside out, which they do because they're passionate about it, obviously. But we were feeding all that into this LMS that was relatively cheap. And then a year or two into it, they jacked their prices up and our school couldn't afford it, and they ran off with all the kids' data. And that's a common thing. For primary schools. It's really gross. So this is kind of a personal journey as well, like to try and fix that so we don't have that happening anymore.
I think any of us who've been working in educational technology for a few years just know the pain of how that feels and how, you know, how did we get ourselves sucked in? But, you know, something like Wikispaces, of course, it was around for years and we loved it.
Yeah.
But there you go. Whoever thought Wikispaces would go? But it's just
Totally.
another company, you know?
Yeah, it's just greedy people. So
well, things change. Things change.
Right. That's
Even Wikispaces. Look, we do need to wrap up. Fiona's put a good comment there. How do we follow what you're doing from here? And of course, you know, we are going to do, we're going to be part of a trial. So we're going to get some information out to you about that as soon as possible now. Of course, don't forget to follow Matt and Kieran on Twitter, even though it's obsolete.
I know.
Many of us are using it though.
Twitter's the spot to go. Well, that's the thing. Like a lot of the stuff that I do on Twitter, if I think it's something really important, I'll peep it. So even if Twitter disappears, everything that I've peeped will be on the Ethereum blockchain. So that's why I kind of like that one the best out of like all these replacement dApps sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I'm willing to have a go, but I started to go down the road of Peep It or Peep Me or something.
Yeah, it's
about 45 minutes ago when you first mentioned it. And the first thing it asked me to do was install something.
MetaMask, it's fun.
I mean, I'm okay. I will.
Still early days for Peep It, but
it is.
Yeah.
Keep trying. It's worth it. But I think, like for the most part, we tweet a lot, myself and Matt and RocketShoes, and I'll check mine as well. So yeah, that's probably the best place I think to stay up to date.
Sure. Well, look, you know, I encourage everyone to use any means you can to stay in touch with RocketShoes and the RocketShoes stars, the Rocket Stars. Rocket Star. I mean, you may want to bring them into your school. You may want to do all sorts of things, but at least stay in touch. This is just the beginning now, of course, of a whole new area of networking and understanding for you in this area. So, look, we do need to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Matt and Kieran. And thank you, Lynn, of course, for bringing this to our attention and for being here with us once again tonight to foster innovation and EdTech startup, basically.
Yeah, thanks. And, you know, like Kieran and Matt have just shown what I was presenting last week about partner with EdTech startups, like work with them. You know, this is just, it's a really powerful relationship that you can establish with startups to actually see how it works in your school as an authentic setting. So great. And Matt's daughter's ready to go to bed.
Yeah, I think there's someone ready to go to bed.
This is the Nook, and she's right at her bedtime now. So I just wanted to say thanks very much for inviting us. We're delighted to be involved, and thank you for being willing to test drive our very new car driving out of the factory that we rode to on our horses.
Okay, well, great. Look, we'll be in touch then over the next day or two, or to sort this out, what we're going to do. But
Awesome.
great.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks again, everyone.
Good night, everyone. That was great. I'll follow up tomorrow, Julie, if that's okay.
That's great. Yep. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, Matt's daughter, who needs to go to bed.
Bye.